Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Susan, the plans they made put an end to you. I think I was about a sophomore in high school when the song Fire and Rain became extremely important to me. Now, I had discovered John Denver several years before, and I had listened to the album that had his version of this song on it over and over and over again. But then one day I arrived at school and discovered that my very best friend had disappeared overnight. She'd vanished, and no one at the school could tell me what had happened to her. Well, this was years before HIPAA laws were in place. They couldn't tell me because they didn't know. In fact, it was several months before we learned that she had moved to California. We found this out when a school there called our school and asked for her records to be transferred. But for those months in between when I didn't even know whether she was alive or not, every time I heard that song, I would cry. I couldn't bear the thought that she might be in danger or hurting. Her mother had died several years before. Her relationship with her father was at best sketchy, and it frightened me. So several years ago, I was at a worship service, and the pastor began to read this all too familiar passage from the Gospel of Luke, the walk to Emmaus. I prepared to sort of tune her out for several reasons. One, it's a very long passage. Two, I've heard this 100 times at least. But then the guitarist behind her began to play the introduction to Fire and Rain. And suddenly my ears and my eyes and my heart was open to hearing this story in ways that I'd never been before. Suddenly, I was right there on the road to Emmaus, walking with these two disciples, heart heavy as theirs were. Suddenly, I knew what it would be like to be walking, not knowing that Christ was right beside me, my heart void of all hope.
Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. While they were talking and discussing with each other, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What were you discussing with each other while you walked along?" They stood still, looking sad. And then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place in these days?" He asked them, "What things?"
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Jesus, the plans they made put an end to you. I walked out this morning, I wrote down this song. I wish that I knew who I could send it to. I've seen fire, I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you, Lord, again.
They replied, "Well, the things about Jesus of Nazareth, who is a prophet, mighty in word and deed before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now the 3rd day since these things took place, and some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive." Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. but they did not see him.
Won't you look down upon us, Jesus? You've got to help us make a stand. You've just got to see us through another day. Your people are aching, their time is at hand. We won't make it any other way. We've seen fire, we've seen rain. We've had sunny days that we thought would never end. There've been lonely times when we couldn't find a friend. But we always thought that we'd see you, Jesus, one more time again.
Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it's almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, he blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and they returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. The 11 were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he's appeared to Simon." Then he told them what happened on the road, and how Jesus had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread.